It's Thursday, and Locked On Syracuse is back. And Bones, we're going to play another little game, this time in the scope of Syracuse football. Not really a game. We're kind of trying to figure out in the games who needs to step up, who needs to elevate their game. We did this on Friday for Syracuse basketball.
Who's going to be the breakout star, Brad? We will let you know today on this episode.
Hey, the Orange lost a lot of guys to graduation, some to NFL camps. That means there are holes to fill, and we're going to tell you where those holes need to be addressed right here on Locked On Syracuse. Let's do it.
Are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, Thursday morning, Locked On Syracuse is back and better than ever. This is Locked On Syracuse. We appreciate you making it your first listen every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast family, and we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. I'm Brad Klein. He's Matt Bonaparte, and we are very excited to be with you because Wednesday, between when we do the show, after we record on Wednesday and then Thursday, it's just kind of a dark and gloomy time for me because I'm without Bones and I'm without Locked On. So now this is the best part of my day.
I'm glad, Brad, that you find so much joy in this podcast, as do I.
Yeah, all right. So we talked a little bit about Syracuse basketball about a week ago on Friday. Go check out the episode because we thought it was entertaining and we were calling out some guys. Hey, who needs to step up for the Orange this year? Let's do it on the football side as well because the Orange lost a lot of key guys and no one to the draft, but to NFL free agency and also just to graduation. So you would think there are some holes that need to be addressed. But I start with who needs to step up, and the answer is Garrett Schrader at quarterback. And the reason is because if you remember last year, now Schrader was a decent quarterback and certainly good enough with Sean Tucker behind him. But all year, he was being criticized between when he took over the starting job and the end of the year. He was being criticized by his own coaching staff, Dino Babers included, saying, we need to be better in the air. So yeah, Garrett Schrader is a very strong mobile quarterback, but if he doesn't elevate his game as a passer, then he's going to lose his job.
Certainly, Garrett Schrader. I don't think we've seen so many wounded ducks in one season last year. I mean, it was crazy. The guy, he just cannot throw the football well. It just doesn't happen very often. There were a couple of good throws last season. That Trevor Pena's 60-yard touchdown catch against Clemson was nice. The Virginia Tech walk-off touchdown was pretty nice. Those are the two throws that stick out in my mind, Brad. But outside of those, nothing comes to mind. I don't know how about you.
Yeah, if you can throw reliably in the first and the second and the third and the fourth quarters, then you're fine if you're Garrett Schrader. And I'm not saying he has to throw it at an elite level, but he needs to be able to throw the ball to the point where people respect his arm.
It's got to be a threat. Yeah, it's got to be a threat.
It's a lot like, honestly, it's a lot like what we're saying about Benny Williams and his three-point shooting. He doesn't have to be an elite three-point shooter, but what good does his first step and his length do for him inside if he can't shoot? People are going to play him back, a lot like Symir Torrance even. You need that other part of your game to hone and strengthen your already proven strength.
Yeah, you're already proven strength, certainly. Yeah, Schrader, and we don't know necessarily if he's going to have the job all season long. It's probably likely. But if Carlos Del Rio Wilson comes in and just has a crazy better arm, which I think a lot of people think he does, there might be a conversation there. But Schrader definitely is the guy that sticks out on the page on the offensive end for me.
But
another guy that does.
The funny thing about Garrett Schrader, though, I'm sorry to cut you off, is that I think that there are other players at other positions that need to elevate their game more in order for Syracuse to win, because Garrett Schrader is not often going to be the reason you lose. But I pointed out Garrett Schrader off the top because his job is in jeopardy more so than other position groups, especially in the offensive end.
Yeah, certainly, sure. but he also is the quarterback. So, I mean, his
Yep.
improvement kind of dictates the team's success in a lot of ways. I'm going to pick an entire position group for my first proposal here, just because I feel like singling out one guy isn't going to do much. This wide receiver room needs to
Yes.
step up. They
Absolutely.
got to do something. Were they good last year? No. Were they terrible? Nah. But they were below average, certainly. Wasn't a guy there after Taj Harris left that was a huge, dangerous threat for any opposing team. Courtney Jackson was fine. He caught 3 touchdowns last year, and with being the number one guy for a large portion of the season, that's really unimpressive. They all have to be a lot better. I mean, you've got Courtney Jackson. Devon Cooper underratedly had the second most receptions on the team last season with 21.
That's
Like, isn't that
terrible.
insane?
That's
That's
terrible.
absurd.
That's
crazy.
awful.
So
that's terrible.
if
Well, I
you're
will say,
Anthony
you're
Quilly
right.
and Damian Alford, you have to step up. And
You're
Courtney
right.
Jackson.
And there's no excuse at this point. Last year was a bit of a mess with the receivers, especially because Harris transfers in the middle of the year. The receivers have to deal with a new quarterback in, I won't say the middle of the year, but during the season they switch quarterbacks, and that's never easy no matter what the receivers tell you. And typically when the media was asking a receiver a question about 2 different quarterbacks, they were asking Taj Harris. Very few people asked Anthony Quilly what it was like, what the adjustment was like. It was Taj Harris. Why? Because he was the de facto captain of the position group, and now he's gone. Now, I will say this. I'm kind of calling them out in a way because there's really nothing more that a Courtney Jackson, a Damian Alford, and Anthony Quilly can ask for. You go to Syracuse, right? Let's take Damian Alford because he's the younger one. You go to Syracuse and you have your ability. He hasn't played that much football. He's from Canada. Really tall, lanky receiver. Has the ability, like I said, and he gets there and he's immediately buried on the depth chart behind guys like Taj Harris. Now, Harris was indisputably the number 1 receiver last year. Now he's gone. He didn't graduate. He left early ahead of schedule. Damian Alford is given a gift here, and now it's on him to step up and capitalize on this inherited opportunity. I don't know if he will. I don't know if Courtney Jackson will or Anthony Quilly, but they absolutely have to, because if they don't, there's no one waiting behind them.
I thought Alford got a little bit better as the season went along. I got more confident in him as the season went along, but still, none of them were especially good. And when they got thrown into the fire right after Taj left, it was bad. I mean, they just weren't very good. They all looked like they had no idea what they were doing. And after Taj left, after that Liberty game, it was brutal.
Tell me if you agree here, because I think in terms of reliability, I say Courtney Jackson is my number 1 guy in the receiving core. And then I'll go with Damian Alford, especially because he was improving last year and the clock kind of ran out on him. The season ended as I think he was really starting to hit his stride, so I'm excited to see what he does next year. Anthony Quilly, to me, hasn't really done much.
He went
between the
down my
20s.
list. He went down my
Yeah.
list. I would have
He's
ranked it Jackson, Quilly, Alford at the beginning of last year, aside from Taj
yes.
Harris. And now I'd say it's Jackson, Alford, Quilly.
I agree. I need to see Quilly do it on first down. I need to see Quilly do it between the 20s. Again, red zone, he's been pretty good.
And a
but
lot of drop passes from Quilly.
a lot of drops. I just need to see it. And the pressure's on, and he needs to elevate his game in that sense.
Aside from those 3 guys, though, I want to see a Rendez-Gatson and Amari Hatcher have something in the tank. Gatson, a guy that in his sophomore season now, he did nothing last year. In the times he was on the field, he was a 0. I want to see him be something. And this is a guy that wasn't supposed to be Marvin Harrison, but was supposed to have some talent to him. And Amari Hatcher, after a redshirt year, I'm expecting big things from him too, because these guys are the future of the receiving corps. So I'm not necessarily saying they have to go out there and contend to be the best receiver on the team, but they need to come off the bench and be something and be the reason that Devon Cooper isn't second on the team in reception. So I'm looking for those guys to step up as well.
And don't forget about the Syracuse bringing in FAU transfer DeMarcus Adams, and he's got some speed, and we'll see. He really didn't do much at Florida Atlantic last year. He's even listed as a cornerback at times in his collegiate career, so he has a lot to prove. So for him to elevate his game, I would say is absolutely essential, not even just for Syracuse to be successful as an offense, but it's essential for him to get on the field in the ACC, right? Because he hasn't been doing it at a very high level in a very high level. So I need him to step up as well. But I feel like those three, Gadsden, Hatcher, and Adams, those are guys that you can't really go into the season expecting much from. You're just hoping that, honestly, one of them steps up and is a big part of your receiver rotation. That's the way I would go into the season if I'm Dino Babers.
Yeah, absolutely. What you got next on the docket, Brad?
Well, first of all, let's take a timeout and talk about BetOnline, because BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. Find all the latest sports developments, news, odds, and including this year's basketball championship matchup, the NHL Hockey Conference Finals, Major League Baseball, and of course, all the latest fighting news from MMA and UFC to boxing. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is where the game starts.
And we have an important favor to ask you. We put together a survey so we can learn more about our listeners like you and make your favorite Locked On podcasts even better. This is your opportunity to tell us what you like and what you don't like about Locked On Podcasts. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey right now to get started. It won't take very long, and everyone that completes the survey can qualify for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. To take our audience survey, go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey. Thank you for your help. All right, Brad, take it away.
All right, so yeah, we're talking a little bit about Syracuse football and who needs to step up here. Talked about the offense to start, the quarterbacks and the receivers. I think, especially the receivers, that's a position group that absolutely needs to step up. We're going to tackle other position groups here. I'd be surprised if we found a position group that was in dire need of improvement more so than the receivers. But if we flip over to the defensive side, we talked a little bit about it in a recent episode. The defensive line has to be better, and I know that I'm more pessimistic about this defensive line than you are. I'm big on Terry Lockett. Other than that, I'm not extremely amped for the rest of the defensive line. You've got Caleb Okechukwu and Steve Linton. They haven't proven much, and they have a lot to prove. Terry Lockett, on the other hand, is a true freshman with 2 sacks, but I'm the guy who, in our What's More Likely episode, go check it out, predicted that one of the linebackers, probably Stephon Thompson, outsacks the entire defensive line next year, and I believe in that.
You believe in that they're going to outsack the entire defensive line combined, which is kind of crazy. I don't exactly think that these guys are going to be the purple people eaters out there, but I think that they could be good. I don't think they're going to be as good as they were last year, because last year Syracuse's defensive line went somewhere it hadn't gone in a long time, and Cody Roscoe led a charge that I don't think anybody expected. But these are 3 guys who we all saw play last year at times, and they were all showed a little bit of talent at times. You mentioned Terry Lockett, who filled in a couple of times on that defensive line, had 12 total tackles, 2 for loss, 2 sacks. He was good. He was a good player. He didn't get a lot of time out there, but when he did, he was good. And Caleb Okechukwu, I think, is going to be good as well. He had 21 tackles last season, 3.5 for loss, 1.5 sacks. Again, not a huge sample size for him, but I think those 2 guys, along with Steve Linton, who really didn't have any time on the field last season, I think they're all going to go out there and be pretty solid. Again, I don't think they're going to be crazy good or anything, but I don't understand why you think they're going to be so bad.
Well, the reason is because think about what they had on the defensive line last year. So you mentioned Steve Linton hasn't played much, and Okechukwu is not playing much either. Linton certainly less than Okechukwu.
They both played fine. Terry and
fine,
Caleb.
But think about it. Last year, the defensive line, the saving grace of it was Cody Roscoe. He comes out of nowhere and is uber successful.
I don't think they're going to be as good as they were last year, but I don't think they're going to be abysmal. I don't think it's going to show the same numbers we saw a couple years ago.
If you take Cody Roscoe out of the equation, and let's just say you have a mediocre guy there instead of a nation-leading guy there, right? What is the defensive line?
Kingsley Jonathan, McKinley
Black.
Williams, Josh Black.
Yeah. So not very good. It's a 3-3-5. You got those three
Kingsley
guys.
Jonathan was fine last year, and so is
Kingsley
McKinley
Jonathan
Williams.
was fine. He's a plus defensive lineman. But Josh Black, I would argue, was not. He was very disappointing, especially considering his frame. And McKinley Williams was a 0 when he was on the field. He took a step back immensely. Now, that doesn't really matter.
He wasn't
because
that
all three of
bad.
those guys, well, he lost his job, and it wasn't even a thought because of the way Roscoe was playing.
He wasn't good, but he wasn't abysmal.
All this to say, those guys are gone. They were the super seniors, and they're gone now. And you put a lot of eggs into that basket last year with them coming back. They got most, if not all, the run. And now you're counting on these other guys to essentially learn on the fly. And as weird as that sounds, because Okacheku is not a freshman. Lockett's a sophomore, so I get that. Okacheku is not a freshman. He's been around. Redshirt junior.
That only
Steve
helps
Linton
him.
Is a redshirt sophomore. They've been in the program, but they really don't have that much. So I'm not looking at Caleb Okacheku as a redshirt junior. I'm actually looking at him more as a redshirt sophomore because he really has.
Well, then you have impaired vision. This is guy. He's been in the program for a long time. That only helps him. And you said it. You said it. The reason that they haven't played that much is because last season you had super seniors. Those guys had to play, and they were good. But Kingsley Jonathan, McKinley Williams, and Josh Black, the lesser of those four, they're gone too. So you just are giving those guys opportunities. Who's to say they don't have talent? You're not.
I'm not saying they don't have talent. I'm just saying that there are likely going to be growing pains as there are with any other position, and especially a guy like, and I've said this multiple times, I'm higher on Okacheku than I am with Steve Linton. I'm looking at Linton as a potential weak link on the defensive line. Now, he can prove me wrong, but we haven't seen anything from him, so I'm calling on him to elevate his game.
Steve, if you listen to this, I hope you know that I'm hoping that you play well, and Brad's a hater.
I'm
all right.
hoping he plays well.
It's all right, Brad. Continue to hate. Continue to hate.
Better.
Go ahead. Continue to hate, Klein.
Okay.
We're gonna move along to the secondary, where I have a couple of names that I'm gonna pinpoint here. All right. The secondary has a lot of names, right? It is the position group where you probably know the most names because we've seen so many guys over the last couple of years or so. In the 1-10 season, the secondary shined. We all know that. 3 of those guys went to the NFL. Jihad Carter is a guy I thought would be better after his freshman season. I thought he was going to be better than he was. And obviously, he still has time to say, hey, I'm good. But we still have to see it. I mean, this is a guy that in his freshman season, he went out there and he kind of held the same ground that Garrett Williams did. He had a couple picks, 65 tackles. He had 3 passes defended, a fumble recovery, and a forced fumble. He was really good in that 2020 season. And then last year, not a single pick, 1 pass defended, 35 tackles. Did it not help him that Deuce Chestnut took a lot of his snaps? Sure, but when he was on the field, he wasn't nearly as effective. And I think he's a good player, but I want to see him step up this year. Another guy I want to see step up.
Jihad Carter. I mean, I want to focus on Jihad Carter
Go ahead.
for a second.
Sure.
Because Carter, to me, and you're right, I expected him to be better after that 2020 season. He stepped up immensely. Him, Rob Hanna, those guys were not supposed to play, and they did, and they played well. And it was kind of a letdown 2021. I can see that. Now, Jihad Carter, I see him as a guy very similar to Garrett Williams, or Garrett Schrader, in that he needs to step up for Syracuse to be successful, yes, but also he's got 2 other players that are behind him in the depth chart as boundary safeties that won his job and have a legitimate case for his job. Eric Quilly has the seniority as the redshirt super senior at this point. Carter's only a sophomore, a COVID sophomore, granted, and Rob Hanna, Ahmad Greenwood there too. And I know you're not.
Don't
a fan
worry
of
about
Smurf.
Amon Greenwood because that guy stinks.
I know you're not a fan of Smurf, but he has played an actual decent amount of snaps, and so that means that when camp really rolls around and when the position groups really start having their battles for playing time, he is going to have his hat in the ring. Now, again, you can make the argument that he's definitely the tertiary thought there, but Carter is not the guaranteed starter here.
Yeah, I mean, I think he kind of is. You don't think that he's the guaranteed starter yet in any sense of the word?
At boundary safety, no, absolutely not. I think Eric Coley can play it as long as he's healthy.
Eric Coley could, but I think Jihad Carter still. I mean, again, he did have a letdown year last year, but the precedent he set in his first season kind of said that he's a really, really good player. Has a lot of talent. You just didn't really see it that much
Yeah,
last
but
year because he
Eric
was in a new
Coley's
role.
been good when healthy. A lot of Carter's playing time has come. I'm not saying he hasn't deserved it because, again, especially 2020, he was really, really good. But Coley's been hurt for a long time in the context of Carter's tenure at Syracuse. So if Coley's healthy now, which he should be, then that changes things. It changes the landscape of the boundary safety
true.
position in the 3-3-5.
It's true. We haven't really seen Eric play recently. All right. One more guy in the secondary that I want to talk about is Jason Simmons Jr. A transfer last year who did not have a bad year from New Mexico State. He was an Aggie. He came over because he said in a Mike McAllister interview that he came to Syracuse because he wanted to be a part of DBU. He saw those guys go to the NFL and he wants to go to the NFL. He played fine last year. He had one pick. He didn't have a single pass defended, which means that was the only time he actually did anything on the ball. He had 38 tackles. He was fine. But he's a guy who's in a similar situation to Jihad in that at free safety, there's competition. You have Rob Hanna right there who's kind of trying to take your job, man. And a transfer, too, in Elijah Clark, who is also a factor now in that room. I think Simmons is a good player. He's a guy that I was really looking forward to seeing at the start of last season. And I've talked on multiple publications about how I thought he was going to be really good. He was fine. He got burned sometimes. Sometimes he really helped, but he was just fine at the end of the day. This is a guy that I think has a lot of potential. And in the inverse of Jihad, he hasn't shown it yet. Jihad, of course, showed it in that first season and then took a step back. Instead, Simmons is a guy who hasn't shown what he can be right now. And if he can come in and show up first day and be that guy, I think he could be really, really good.
I get it. Yeah, I think that you're right. The thing about Jason Simmons is that he has a lot of athleticism, and that's why you were likely very excited about him coming out of New Mexico State. That being said, I think that if he doesn't step up, I'm not really concerned about Simmons. If he doesn't step up, then it's okay because I am confident in Rob Hanna to play that position well. And I'm actually really excited to see Elijah Clark coming from Rutgers. So it's a lot like that. Want to see that shiny new toy. I know you are team see new toy with the quarterbacks and Carlos Del Rio Wilson, just out of raw curiosity. I know we talked to Mike McAllister about, what was it, a week ago. He was the same way with especially the quarterbacks. I don't think Elijah Clark is getting enough love coming from the transfer portal. I'm excited to see him. So if Simmons doesn't step up, and if Simmons is, even if he falls down to third string free safety, I see a very legitimate world where Syracuse plays well and Syracuse overextends their expectations.
Sure. But do you have one more guy, Brad?
I do. One more guy, and he is the heart and soul of the position group. And it's probably the guy who has the most pressure on him. And it's Andre Schmidt.
I thought you were going to go Maximilian Mang.
No, I wasn't going to talk about Max Mang. I don't think he's done anything egregiously wrong yet. And, yeah, I mean, people are going to look at him and wonder why he only has 2 catches all year. And the reason is because he's coming from Germany and no one mentioned catching footballs in the recruiting. But Andre Schmidt was awful last year. I mean, he was
Hey, that's a preseason 4th team All-American or All-ACC player you're talking about,
so
man.
is Jawar Jordan. So watch out. So
that 4th team specials team is
Andre
crazy.
Schmidt wins the Lou Groza in 2018 as the kicker of the year. And his percentage of made field goals that year was 88%. He's gotten worse ever since. 85 in his sophomore year. Yeah, by the way, he was a freshman in 2018. 85 his sophomore year. In 2020, he was 82%, just under 82%. So, okay, fine. It was a weird year. They were a bad team, whatever. In 2021, last year, supposed to be his best season, he was at 64% field goals. That is garbage. So
It was bad.
And look, I'm not a kicking expert. I'm not going to tell you what he's doing wrong. I'm not going to tell you about his plant foot or anything like that. All I know is the ball needs to go through the uprights, and it just didn't enough last year for Andre Schmidt. It's a do or die year for the NFL. He could have left after last year, but I don't think many, if any, NFL teams would be excited to take a flyer on him. He came back for that reason. He's got a lot to prove for his career. He's got a lot to prove in terms of Syracuse winning football games because, yeah, he hit the game winner against Liberty, and that was all well and good. But think about the big field goals he missed down the line in the year. I mean, that was a big difference, and Syracuse probably would have been bowl eligible if Andre Schmidt was not even the 2018 version of himself, but the 2019-2020 version of himself.
Yeah, he was bad. And maybe he also has to prove you wrong because you have the Brad Klein conspiracy theory about Andre Schmidt, that he's actually not good at all. So, yeah, he definitely has to. He's got to go out there and prove a lot of people wrong. All right, well, we outlined who needs to show up for Syracuse this season in order for the team to be back on top. And back on top, I mean, maybe 10 wins freshman season or our freshman year. That 10-3 season was pretty fun. You had any final thoughts, Brad? Anything we missed?
No final thoughts. I will say we're pointing a lot of fingers here and we're calling guys out. And the pressure's on now. When Locked On calls you out, now it's time to perform. But Andre Schmidt, I would say, before we go, we mentioned a lot of names here. I would say Andre Schmidt is my number one guy who needs to step up. Who's your number one guy?
Since my first one was a group, I'm just going to point to the wide receiver room. Those are my number one guys, plural. Those guys need to step up.
No, I know that you're being purposefully broad, but if you had to point out one receiver who really needs to step up, who is it?
I'm going to go Anthony Quilly because he had high expectations, and he's been dreadful. So I'll go Quilly. All right. Well, thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. Now make your second listen to Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. Rafael Barlow, Richard Stamen, Sam Ferris, and Leif Thulin give fans an in-depth look into the biggest prospects, the latest player rankings, and of course, big boards. Follow Locked On NBA Big Board every day on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Brad and I will be back with you tomorrow for the last episode of the week. We'll see you then.